Yeah, just let me see. Yeah, up and down. All right, so Citizen Hush is up next, and then Control Pew. So let's give a round of applause for Citizen Hush.
Well, all right. So first off, first order of business, I just want to thank Ragnar for organizing this. Working with me and the other speakers and folks who are in attendance is like herding cats. So thanks for putting this together, man. This is really beautiful to see, like all these folks coming from way across the country to talk about freedom, liberty, something guns, all things very near and dear to my heart. I also want to give a shout out and say hi to the feds in attendance. Follow me on Twitter if you don't already. And so real quick, before I jump in, so when Ragnar reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in doing a talk, first I was incredibly humbled. I didn't know what to talk about. Like, I'm just this another insufferable social media personality. And also I didn't know what to call my talk. So I came up with a couple working titles. So what we see up here, Guns, Crypto, and Internet Clout, a cautionary tale. Wanted to stay true to kind of like my personality. I try not to take myself too seriously, make fun of myself a lot on the internet, but that was a little too silly, so I scratched that one out. Next, I went with tyranny and its discontents. I'll be honest, I don't know what that means. It just sounds good. So I scratched that. It was a little too serious. I ended up landing on Tales from the Trap House. And for those of you who don't know, a lot of you are here from Twitter. I lovingly refer to my Twitter followers as the Trap House. It's also what I refer to where we're going to be tomorrow shooting guns, are the range that I live next to, and I refer to that as the Trap House. So that's kind of where this is at, and this is about my journey and how I ended up here on stage. I've hung out with a lot of folks from the internet, and contrary to what my parents warned me about when I was younger, some of the best people I've met in my life, some of the most intelligent, kind, generous people have came from the internet. I've met up with several Twitter followers, people off Reddit in real life. Haven't been sodomized once, so that's a win. So, yeah. So who am I? If you haven't noticed, I am the diversity representation for the Guns and Bitcoin conference. I am representing the Ocean Mexican delegation here. I'm probably most well known for about a year ago. I started a YouTube channel, YouTube channel, where I shot a bunch of guns, did some run and gun with AFA back there, great firearms trainers here in Austin, Texas. Go get trained, it's good shit. And I did it in a Snorlax onesie for the lulz and the internet points. Trust me, like this slide, it's just downhill from here, I promise. I tried to model my slide deck off of a 1990s NBA PowerPoint, so you'll notice a lot of cringy stock photos and things of that nature. But I don't really think the question about who I am is very interesting. What's more interesting is how I got here on this stage. I think the too long didn't read on this is, quite frankly, I have no business being on this stage with these other people who are speaking today. They're much smarter, much more articulate than I am. But nevertheless, here I am. I'm a resident of Goon Twitter, 2A Twitter. There's several goons in the audience, so thanks for coming out, y'all. It's a good time. For those of you who don't know, goons, we're kind of like the 2A autists of Twitter. If Weekend Gun It existed on Twitter, that's us, before they were banned. A few years ago, so I set out to be the nicest guy you'll meet with a gun. And a lot of firearms culture is a bunch of silly posturing and like super tactical Costco dads and accountants. And really, I just want to have fun with it. So I started my small but mighty YouTube channel with like this vision of if Bob Ross had a shooting show. And that's really what I'm trying to go for here. And about like, so after talking about who I am and how I got here, so this is kind of a linear progression. Like around the financial crisis, I was wrapping up school, I discovered libertarianism, went into the deep end. I see someone with a Murray Rothbard shirt, so Very nice, sir. And libertarianism and liberty provided a framework for how I view my adult life, for better or worse. I worked in tech as an engineer. I refer to myself as a recovering engineer because A, quite frankly, I'm not that great of an engineer. I'm like a solid B minus, like on a good day. And then B, I got tired of writing code and wanted to build things in the real world. And I found that outlet sometime in grad school with crypto and firearms. And so going back to that, Bitcoin had just broke dollar parity when I entered grad school, and within the next 2 years reached $1,200. The headlines in the media always focus on the price. Just like with 3D printed guns, they focus on like the gun itself. What's more interesting to me, like the price and the guns, like those are the least interesting things to me. What's interesting to me is what that represents, and that's liberty. And this is fascinating to me because with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, I saw it as a way to put my political views where my mouth is and be able to bet against those yee-ass nerds and central planners at the Federal Reserve. So I got into shooting in 2016, and Twitter had started becoming an outlet. I met and learned from a lot of great shooters, both civilian and former military, and that's how I ended up here today. And on the internet, I never really got too much into the gun policy side. It was silly to me. I don't care about politics. I don't want to argue policy or argue politics on the internet. I just want to shoot my guns, dog. And my entire philosophy was buy more guns and create more gun owners to make gun control logistically impossible. And then 3D printed guns was that at scale. And aside from arming myself, something that's incredibly important to me is being able to arm others. And one of my friends here in the audience, that's actually a quote I stole from him, so sorry, guy. And with 3D printed guns, admittedly, I'm new to this. I got my Ender 3 in December 2020. I'm still learning. I got a lot of kinks I'm ironing out, and I've had varying degrees of success. The camera crew here actually captured pretty much all of my failures. I don't think I could have failed any harder than last weekend when we were failing. And like that's not an indictment of the technology. That's an indictment of the person who assembled these things, me. The human is the single point of failure here. And so those are three things about how I got here. And they're central parts to my identity: liberty, firearms, and cryptocurrency. And I've observed a lot of overlap between these communities as well as shared challenges. So let's talk about some of these examples. In 1982, the Gen 1 Glock 17 is released. I believe that's right. What did the boomer FUDs have to say about the Gen 1 Glock 17? That plastic handgun is gonna explode in your hand. Sound familiar? You're gonna buy a 1911 anyway, so you might as well. The media was also saying, these plastic handguns can get through metal detectors. That's a direct quote from Die Hard. Now, let's go to today, 2021. 3D printed guns mature as a technology. What are the boomer FUDs saying? That plastic handgun's gonna explode in your hand. You're gonna buy a 1911 anyway. And the media is also saying, these plastic handguns can get through metal detectors in spite of metal components. It's silly. But Bitcoin isn't immune to silly hysteria either. So we've seen a lot of talk in the media. Are my slides showing up? All right, cool. We're not getting truncated. So here I've got a headline where Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, is saying cryptocurrency is only fit for use of drug dealers, murderers, money launderers, and people living in North Korea. That is a quote from September 2017. This is a headline from February 2021. JP Morgan is now saying investors can allocate 1% of their portfolios to Bitcoin. That's interesting. Well, what else has JP Morgan been up to? JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank named in money laundering report. Bank share slide, September 21st, 2020. In addition to $35.8 billion in fines that JP Morgan has racked up since the year 2000. So I don't think the question's really Bitcoin is for criminals and money launderers. Maybe fiat is for criminals and money launderers. So Ragnar and Dominica both touched on this idea of parallel institutions. and complex systems. And I mentioned I'd never really been interested in the firearms policy debate side of things, and that's largely because I don't have time or interest in arguing with people on the internet. That's not to say it's not valuable. There are lots of people who do phenomenal jobs of articulating this. I'm just not, quite frankly, one of them. I can barely read and write. So what I'm interested in doing is contributing to systems that make authoritarians obsolete. Parallel institutions are what enables us to wage asymmetrical warfare from within the current system without firing a single bullet, but you still have the option to. And so in recent weeks, the Second Amendment's been a hot topic, and I think it's worth touching on a little bit about the state of the Second Amendment in this country. And I'll be honest with you, it ain't pretty. It ain't pretty. I would argue gun owners ended up playing defense in the firearms policy debate because we assumed it was a debate in the first place. It never was. The media is stacked against us. Politicians, they've never been good for anything. This is an emotional debate fueled by sensationalism and security theater, not a rational one. And the Second Amendment and gun owners, we ended up in this situation because we brought data to a fist fight. And this was you don't fight with data, Doc. So if we look at this as firearms are the expression of taking your own safety and protection into your own hands, as well as acting a deterrence to tyranny, Bitcoin is just the financial expression of this, taking ownership of your own financial decisions and opting out of institutions incentivized to invade privacy and dictate who you can and cannot transact with. That's an incredibly powerful idea, and one that I don't think a lot of folks, when they first get into this, really wrap their heads around. The firearms industry has been confronted by this in recent years, such as payment providers and gateways effectively deplatforming firearms retailers, Shopify being notable. I'm not sure if those of you who've been following it, but Shopify effectively kicked any 2A-friendly merchant off of their platform. Folks aren't even selling guns, like gun accessories. If you have the word gun in your meta description, you're flagged. From a freedom of information perspective, 3D printed firearms are just the natural evolution of this. And these three communities are naturally complementary to me, and they're parallel institutions. And the central planners in the government represent centralized control. They effectively have a monopoly on the use of force and have killed more people than any private actor in history. And the burden of proof is on them to show that more government equals a better, more peaceful society. And quite frankly, they don't have a very good track record. And I know I'm speaking to the choir here, so I'm going to move forward. And these days you hear this phrase a lot in the debate that we should trust the experts, trust them. Well, who are the experts? They're this nebulous class of people who are assumingly well-intentioned and have a lot of power and know what's best for us little guys with zero accountability. And anyone who questions the experts are cast out as tinfoil hat amateurs, white supremacists, whatever. Well, guess what? We got a Notion Mexican on stage. That narrative's gone. But like, what's so wrong with amateurs? Like, amateurs are wrongfully classified as being these bumbling idiots versus the reality, the on-the-ground reality of stochastic tinkering, constantly failing, learning from those failures to improve something. So I wanted to look at the actual definition of what an amateur is, and I had Siri read it to me because I don't know how to use the Google. An amateur is one who engages in a pursuit, study, science, or sport as a pastime rather than a profession. And some of the most impactful innovations in history were developed by amateurs. So let's talk about some examples. Amateurs gave us Bitcoin. It was developed by an unknown hobbyist named Satoshi Nakamoto and sustained by teams of brilliant volunteer developers. Well, professionals gave us the 2008 financial crisis that erased $12 trillion from the global economy. Amateurs gave us Wikipedia and Khan Academy. If you got an internet connection and a laptop, you can learn pretty much anything you want. And professionals gave us standardized testing and schools that more closely resemble prisons than places of learning. Amateurs gave us the Wright brothers, high school dropouts whose innovations gave birth to the modern aviation industry. And professionals gave us the fucking TSA. So, talking about this, most of you probably know this guy is Friedrich Hayek. I love this quote. The curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they can imagine, about what they imagine they can design. And I love this quote because central planners, politicians, bureaucrats, the like, they all like to believe they can architect and by proxy control a world devoid of rough edges and a world where speech is policed, privacy is a privilege, not a right. And the right to defend yourself is ridiculed, quite frankly. We live in a time where we got it so damn good, we're trying to vote our own rights away. And that's an irony. There's a quote from The Dark Knight Rises where Bane says, "Victory has truly defeated you." And that's kind of how I feel. So the time for debate's over. I think it's build shit. Let's build shit instead. And there will be failures along the way. This is my very first attempt at a DD19.2 3D printed. The Glock 19 slide. I took it to the range with this camera crew last weekend. And first shot draw, got my sights on, and my frame cracked. First shot. Quite embarrassing, but I still got my hands, bruh. And you know what, like, it was embarrassing because I brought this camera crew to learn about this cool technology. And here I am, like, in their eyes, probably, like, I'm like, oh, I'm probably the first 3D printed dude that they've met. And here I am just, like, fumbling through all this shit. And that's what I'm interested in. Showing, with this filming, showing the process as someone who's a noob, and then showing something on Sunday that's completely refined, that functions. And that's what's interesting to me. And I went back to the range at Austin a couple weeks ago with the Anderson Hellfire with a 22LR conversion kit, FMDA, DD17.2, and we ran a bunch of courses of fire with AFA. And this is how innovation happens. Innovation isn't top-down control command. It happens down to the ground level where the amateurs are, where we tinker because we love things and because we're interested in them. And that's not to say that there aren't obstacles. We've got Second Amendment, we've got the ATF, financial freedom, we've got the IRS and the SEC, and then the glowy boys also with the 3D printed guns as well. And so adoption is one of the core obstacles that I see across all three communities. Gun owners, we have it. That's one of my favorite things to do. Take new Californians moved here to Texas, take them out shooting for the first time. And 9 times out of 10, I hand them an AR-15, walk them through the safety, how to operate it. 9 times out of 10, the response is, yo, I think I low-key like guns, dog. And that's one of my favorite things to do. That's what adoption is. There are many ways we can go for adoption. Onboarding people into crypto, taking people out shooting, getting them in, bite size. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to adoption. This is just the one that works for me. And like adoption's a lot like pornography. I don't know how to do it, but I can recognize it when I see it. So are you guys open for a little social experiment? Yeah. All right, cool. All right, so waterfall starts with a single drop. So let's look at this. This is an experiment for adoption. Could you all just give me a golf clap? Okay. Very nice. So that's me taking coworkers to the shooting range. Just getting the hooks in. Now double the volume on that golf clap. All right, it's getting louder. My nipple's getting hard. That is one of those people that I took to the shooting range asking me about, so how much does one of these cost? Double the volume on that clap that y'all just did. That's me pointing them to gun deals. All right, now I want you guys to go crazy on this one. So let's just say I snap my magical internet fingers and the ATF is abolished and we don't have to deal with them anymore. What would that sound like? That's how adoption works. You don't lead with that. You incrementally get people moving towards that direction. And now we live in an armed society, an armed and free society. So that's my talk.